What happened to me 7 years ago, I was involved in a very nasty head-on collision whilst driving the ambulance. And this wasn't just an accident, this was a deliberate attempt on my partner in my workplace at the time's lives. This gentleman, who was a mental health patient, hit us at 100 kilometres an hour, which I'm not sure what that is in America. It hit us with his lights off and hit us head on, and from that day on, my entire life changed. I was trapped, I was busted up in so many areas. But what it actually did was it put me into a state of severe PTSD and depression. At the time, I was full of hatred, I was full of revenge, I was so angry. But then as I healed, what actually happened was I shed off all those masks, all those layers, all that armour that I've been carrying for 50 years, because that's what we do as humans. We just keep putting on masks to keep functioning in a world that we're not really functioning in. There's a thing called the core needs, and the top 4 core needs are certain safety and comfort, variety and change, significance, and love and connection. That job gave me all of those. And when I lost that job, I lost my identity. And I lost who I was. Well, I want to assure everybody, I'm 57 now, and I actually am probably the best I've ever been financially because I changed the way I looked at money, budgets, finance, superannuation, and where I prioritise. And I still have fun, and I still do things for my children and myself. But the one thing I don't do is I never budgeted before. And Amy got me onto a budget, God love her. And it's amazing, it actually scares you how much silly money you spend that you don't need to be spending. But it's the mindset and it's the lack mentality that keep people stuck in that I can't move forward mode.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Yount with my beautiful and intelligent and wonderful co-host, Jackie Cummins-Koski. We just got back from the EconoMe conference. We had a blast. I know this is coming out later, but Jackie, what were your impressions?
Yeah, well, I always love EconoMe. Part of it's that I'm so close. I'm only about 45 minutes north, so I don't have to get a flight or anything like that. But it's exactly what they say on their website. It is a party about money, and we get to see so many of our friends that we've gotten to know over the years. That's how we met, right, Bill? The first time we met.
Yeah, we met 5 years ago at EconoMe. You were one of the first speakers, and I've been going every year since. It sells out every year now, and it's 500 of your best friends partying about money and life.
Yeah, so we've talked about it often on the show. So if you haven't gone yet, last year or 2025 sold out very, very quickly. 2026, it'll probably be the same thing. So if you've thought about going and you were on the fence, make sure you get your tickets very early as possible. Book your hotel as early as possible. And you get a lot of information, and there's breakouts, there's speakers. But honestly, I think you agree with this, Bill, is a lot of it is about the social stuff that you can't get online. Seeing people in person, hanging out with them, having breakfast with them, the social events, drinking a beer, those are things that you cannot get online. And I think that is what's so unique about this event and other FI events that are in person as well. So we would love to see more people there.
Yeah, I mean, Diana Merriam puts on the show. She's done a great production every year. You can find your tickets at economeconference.com. That's EconoMe, ECONOME, conference.com. We have a special surprise for you today. We are talking with Tasch Rogers in Australia. She's on the Gold Coast. And before we get started with her introduction, I want to highlight a charity that is near and dear to her heart, and she'll tell us about it. It's called Kids with Cancer, but that's in Australia. So it's kidswithcancer.org.au. Tasch, welcome to the show, but tell us about this charity and what it means to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. This Kids for Cancer, our Kids with Cancer Foundation, means a lot to me. I've had several friends and some family members, unfortunately, either lose their children or have that battle with cancer at such a young age. But it has such an impact on not just the child that's unwell, has an impact on the entire family. And this foundation supports Ronald McDonald House and some other side hustles, I guess, on the side for them to be able to help the children, help the families with financial pressures, clothing, food, people that are coming from interstate in the country regions that have no family. So these organisations help the whole family, not just the child that's unwell.
All right, that's awesome. We'd like to highlight a charity every show, and we would encourage you to donate internationally. Your giving plan should include not only the United States, but other folks that need our help as well. Let me introduce Tasch. Tasch Rogers comes to us today from the Gold Coast down under in Australia. I heard Tasch speak to a group of women in one of Amy Caruso's Real Talk Finances meetups. Amy is a past guest on the show in episode 18, Avocado Toast and Guardians of the Galaxy. Tune back in to that show, one of the originals back from 2 years ago. She famously said, and I paraphrase, quote, "The emphasis on late starting should not be on late, but on starting." I am the proud and only male member of her women's only platform. You can find her at www.realtalkfinance.com. So as a life coach with expertise in holistic modalities and various other disciplines, Tasch brings a wealth of experience to her clients. With a career spanning 30 years as a paramedic, she has witnessed firsthand the challenges and complexities of life. I can certainly relate to this as an emergency physician. She is also intimately familiar with the effects of trauma and PTSD, having personally navigated through her own healing journey from childhood trauma and work-related PTSD. Through this process, she has developed a deep appreciation for the power of self-discovery, self-compassion, and the importance of holistic healing. Drawing on her vast life experience, she provides personalized coaching now to help individuals overcome obstacles, clarify their values, and achieve their goals. Whether it's improving relationships, managing stress and anxiety, or finding greater purpose and fulfillment, she is committed to helping bring her clients transform their lives and realize their full potential. Her approach is warm, compassionate, and non-judgmental. I think you'll see that today. She believes that everyone has the capacity for growth and positive change. She is passionate about helping others discover and unleash, actually unshackle, their inner strength and resilience. Tasch, welcome to Catch You Up to 5, all the way from down under.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Jackie. I feel so honoured to have been invited onto here today. What an awesome entering for me. That was beautiful. Thank you. You've made me sound amazing.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. We can't wait to get into it here.
I listened to your webinar and I knew right away that we needed to have you on the show because your perspective, even though it's from Australia, resonates with men, women, and maybe especially women around the world. And our audience is international. We need to give a shout out to Canada, New Zealand, England, and Australia. We are very fortunate to have fans all around the world. I want to give a shout out also to Ruth, the Happy Saver, down in New Zealand. And if you listen to episode 4 of our show, you'll find our first Australian guest, Late Starter Fire. She goes by her first name, Priscilla. So we want to wind this back. Take you back. We don't know how old you are yet, but maybe we don't need to because we need to go back to childhood. And there's potentially sort of a personal and a money story there that in order for our audience to understand you, we need to hear about. So take us through sort of your early personal and money journeys.
Okay, so my background, I came from Germany. So we came to Australia when I was 2 years old. We were a very, very poor family. We came over with nothing. My dad was a bricklayer and my mum was a stay-at-home mum with, at that stage, 3 children. And then a 4th came about 4 years later. We rented our whole life. We didn't own anything, so we moved from place to place and we were always at risk of having to be moved along or out of the town that we were wanting to live in. We lived from week to week and sometimes that didn't even last. We were sometimes for weeks without food, without the necessities. I was always known as the poor kid, which, as you can imagine, that set me up for low self-worth, low self-esteem. And all those years of going through that really didn't make sense to me until the last 7 or 8 years. So let's fast forward a bit. I've spent my whole life in lack mentality and not having enough, and always, when I get enough money, I'll do this, when I do this, when I do that, rather than look forward and work ways to make it happen. I would sit in that pit of not having enough. So then I pass that on to my children. So they live in that lack mentality, which we're all adjusting now, which is great. But what happened to me 7 years ago, I was involved in a very nasty head-on collision whilst driving the ambulance. And this wasn't just an accident. This was a deliberate attempt on my partner in my workplace at the time's lives. This gentleman, who was a mental health patient, hit us at 100 kilometres an hour, which I'm not sure what that is in America. It hit us with his lights off and hit us head on. And from that day on, my entire life changed. I was trapped. I was busted up in so many areas. But what it actually did was it put me into a state of severe PTSD and depression. And this is a very condensed story, shortened, but basically I ended up in a facility for 6 months and I had deep therapy. I didn't want to be here anymore. I was checking out. There was nothing left. As far as I was concerned, I was no longer a paramedic. I couldn't be who I wanted to be, and I spiraled. After 6 months of treatment, and my sister, who is a holistic healer and has shaman abilities, was helping me through those healing processes. And at times they were tough. They were really tough because we were having to break some really deep, dark generational patterns and programming and conditioning, which is where our lack of money comes from. We are not born with a lack mentality. It's handed to us. So after that initial 12 months, I started to do some really deep work. And over the last 4 years, I've been running my own business now as a trauma coach, a life coach, a mindset coach. I work in all areas because I feel that other than a few things in life, I've experienced a lot. I've experienced poor relationships, abuse, neglect, abandonment, alcoholic father, dysfunction in a family, which I teach people now that those conditions, those patterns, those programs are given to you within the first 7 years of your life. From 0 to 7, we are given a blueprint. We don't have a choice. That's what's handed to us. And like I say to everybody, this is not a parent bashing story. This is not where we blame anyone. Our parents did the best that they could with what they had. And as now a mum of 3 beautiful children and 2 granddaughters, I am doing everything in my powers to break those generational patterns within my family, and it's working well. Nothing's perfect. We're all getting there on different levels and different speeds, but we're all getting there. The thing that I learned the most about myself through all the trauma and breaking down the programs was how little I knew about budgeting, finances, looking after yourself, financial future. I just used to think, it'll be right, we'll work it out. But then when the time comes that you have nothing and it hits the fan, you've got nothing. You've got no reserves. You've got nothing there to say, I've got a buffer. I've got nothing there to say if this happens. I nearly, after my accident, lost my home because being on workers' comp in Australia isn't great, and they don't support the ambulance service like they support the police and the fire brigade. We don't get a pension. We are basically left to suffer, which is why there are so many broken paramedics out there. The ambulance do not have any sort of a system in place for paramedics that fall down, whereas the police and the fire brigade do.
So they're responsible for their own financial future?
Absolutely.
Wow. So I'm hearing you tell your story, Tasch, and it's just so interesting that, yes, you're in another country, but these life issues and financial issues, they transcend borders. It doesn't matter. You know, you could be someone easily that's right here in the US. And, you know, when you were talking about that traumatic, I guess we'll call it an accident, but you said it may have been done on purpose. So after that experience where you had the collision, so how long were you in the hospital before you recovered enough to come home to try to put your life back together?
So after the accident, it took about it was about 8 months before I really spiraled.
Wow.
So for 8 months, I was living this life of, I was trying to go back to work. I couldn't put the uniform on. I couldn't go near a truck. I had no idea what was going on. It was horrendous. And I would just cry and cry. And I was that social queen of the ambulance service. I was involved in everything, from an opening of an envelope to an opening of a station. I was there. That was my world. So to not be able to function in that capacity or in that environment anymore, it spiraled me. But what happened was, later in my journey, I figured out why I spiraled, which I can go to soon. But after the 6 months in hospital, I then had a lot of recovery at home. So then my children, my daughter, who is now 29, she had to care for me. My sister came and lived with me for a while. I lost my relationship because it was too much stress on the person. And I look back at that now, and it was just chaos and drama. It was horrible. And we just couldn't survive in it. And so that, I lost that. So I lost my job. I lost my partner. I lost my son, my youngest son. He was off the rails because mum was broken. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So there was a lot of fallout from an accident that was not, like, we didn't even have any opportunity to rectify it because he turned his lights off. We didn't see him coming. And it was all just taken away from me that night. But having said that, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I can honestly say that 7 years down the track.
Well, you see, in listening to your story, there's sort of serial challenges, serial traumas throughout your life that started as a young child with poverty, food scarcity, and maybe some financial scarcity. You didn't have the backstops that a lot of people have. And then this pivotal event of a crash, literally a crash, was the fulcrum to major changes in your life. Tell us about those. How was it the best thing in your life if it was so terrible?
Now, at the time, I was full of hatred. I was full of revenge. I was so angry. But then as I healed, what actually happened was I shed off all those masks, all those layers, all that armor that I've been carrying for 50 years, because that's what we do as humans. We just keep putting on masks to keep functioning in a world that we're not really functioning in. There's a thing called the core needs, and the top 4 core needs are certain safety and comfort, variety and change, significance, and love and connection. That job gave me all of those. And when I lost that job, I lost my identity and I lost who I was.
So you never went back to being a paramedic after that accident?
No. And there was many attempts, and I could not go. I could not put the uniform on. Part of my exposure therapy was I had to carry my uniform around for 3 weeks. And it was the most distressing thing, which was so bizarre because anybody that knew me, I had such admiration and I felt so proud to wear that uniform. So to not be able to step back into it, it was devastating for me. But what it did was the best thing that ever, I found myself. In all of that healing and all of that trauma and in all of the chaos, I actually found who Tasch was. Tasch is no longer a paramedic. Tasch isn't a life coach. Tasch isn't a mum. Tasch is an individual. Tasch is a person who came to this earth and is having a journey. And what it also gave me was it allowed me to be present. It allowed me to heal from a lot of childhood trauma. It allowed me to recognise the patterns in my financial, my relationships, my work, my friendships, of people-pleasing, procrastinating, all those things that we do because we put it down to that's just who he is. And that is the one thing I say to people, just because that's how that person is or that's how you are doesn't mean you have to stay like that. I have never been somebody who has been financially abundant until this all happened for me, because I changed my mindset. I changed how I look at money. I changed how I look at the way life, things that come into us. I don't just ignore signs. I look at things that are going on and I think, okay, what can I control here? What can't I? What do I focus on? Where do I put my time, energy, and effort? And this is where a lot of people get themselves so worked up and stressed over financial stuff, especially later in life when we haven't set ourselves up. They think that's it, that's over. Well, I want to assure everybody, I'm 57 now, and I actually am probably the best I've ever been financially because I changed the way I looked at money, budgets, finance, superannuation, and where I prioritise. And I still had fun and I still do things for my children and myself. But the one thing I don't do is I never budgeted before. And Amy got me onto a budget, God love her. And it's amazing. It actually scares you how much silly money you spend that you don't need to be spending. But it's the mindset and it's the lack mentality that keep people stuck in that I can't move forward mode. And that's one of the biggest things I found.
Well, I struggle even still probably with a scarcity mindset. I mean, I've had my own traumas in life. I think everybody has, whether it be medical, financial, political, emotional, educational. I mean, both what you and Jackie have in common is that you came out of poverty into abundance. And I find that so inspirational. I was a middle-class person. I'm a high-income professional. I didn't have the same struggles and challenges you had. I don't know what food scarcity feels like. Heck, I'm overweight. I have a food abundance problem.
Well, we all got a little bit of that, Bill.
But it shows me how resilient the human spirit is. You know, you may have had more than your fair share, but you're such an optimistic, forward-thinking person that's now giving back to other people, helping them overcome their traumas. Tell us a little bit about that transition. We know that you had the crash. We know that you had a long recovery. We know that you were in despair. Heck, maybe you were even suicidal. We don't know. It can get that bad,
Yeah,
right?
100% I was, yeah.
So we talk about the wake-up moment. What was the wake-up and how did you start in a different trajectory, a different direction?
Yeah. So the wake-up moment for me, I remember this so vividly. I met a person, so I'd been through the trauma, I'd lost my relationship, and I thought I was in quite a headspace to meet someone. And I had met this man, and that was in October 19. And by March, April 20, I was nearly back in a hospital. He was a very, very nasty, no one likes this word, but narcissistic person, and that broke me. That actually nearly did as much damage as the trauma did. And what it did was it woke me up. It put me through this really deep trauma and depression again because there was abuse again. And I was like, hang on, I've just gotten out of this. And what it did was I basically call it a rebirth. It pushed me through a membrane of what I call, that was the day I had my awakening. And from there on, I just went on this spiritual journey and grew and grew and grew and learned more and more. I was like a sponge. I was taking in as much as I could to understand the psychology of why I kept attracting these people, what it was what kept me in those places. So what then happened was within that 12 months to 18 months, I then started to get myself educated in coaching, trauma work, intergenerational trauma, childhood trauma, child work, all the modalities that go with healing people from early childhood. Because most of my clients are probably late 30s, early 40s through to 60s and 70s, because it's our generation that was pretty damaged. And again, it's not a bashing session on our parents. It's just what they were given. So these patterns and programs are handed to you each generation. And the best analogy I can give is, I don't know if you guys have heard of Kerwin Rae. Did you know Kerwin Rae?
No, explain that to us.
He's a motivation, well, rest in peace. He actually passed away probably 12 months ago. But he was one of the most sought after motivational speakers here in Australia. He was amazing. He came from a lot of dark background as well. But he said that, the analogy he used to give was back in the, 50s, they used to cook a leg of lamb and they'd chop off the ends of the leg of lamb because the ovens at those stages were small. So what happened, each generation, they would cut off the ends of the lamb. But now we have these 9 feet ovens or 9 metre or whatever, however big that is, big ovens, and they're still cutting off the ends of the lamb. And people are like, why do you do that? Well, because Grandma did it. Well, why did Grandma do it? Because Grandma did it. So each generation took on what Grandma did. Didn't matter that things had changed. They still stayed with what they knew, because people fear the unknown. And people don't like change, and people don't like uncertainty. So what I was so afraid of was becoming this different version of Tash. But actually, it's the best version of Tash that I've ever been. It's the most authentic I've been. And don't get me wrong, I still have ups and down days, but I am the person that knows how to get myself back up again. And my decision then was to help and educate as many people as I could to reconnect with themselves. Because we lose ourselves, we disconnect from ourselves. So we make poor choices. We end up in toxic relationships. We stay in workplaces that don't serve us. So what I do in my Unshackled program now is I help educate people on their psychology, their boundaries, their self-awareness, their emotional intimacy, their epigenetics, their internal family systems. There's so many modalities, so many pillars that I cover because there's so many areas that affect how we heal.
That's amazing because I'm in the healthcare field and it's not a very healthy place to work sometimes because you're dealing with so much that's overwhelming. As a paramedic, I respect the work you've done because you deal with uncontrolled situations and uncontrolled healthcare issues, and you bring them to the hospital, which to me is a much more controlled environment. It's still uncontrolled in the emergency department, but what you've dealt with is taking an absolute mess and getting it to a hospital where we take it to the next level. And I can only imagine the trauma you experienced in what you saw in the real world that most people don't see. And it just accumulates. It really accumulates. And it doesn't sound like it led to burnout in you, though, which I find fascinating. Why didn't it?
It did. So the icing on the cake was the accident. So prior to the accident, I had 3 major assaults whilst on duty. And I just kept saying, all right, I'm not letting them stop me. I'm not letting them stop me. I'm not letting these mental health patients stop me. I'm still going. I'm Tash. I'm strong. Tash was breaking. Tash was at breaking point. And I remember on the day of the accident, I remember saying to my partner, who I was working with, I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I actually can't do this anymore. And I'm a big believer in the universe gives us signs, and if you don't listen, they'll get you. And sure enough, that night, that was the biggest slap for me. And I do remember a girlfriend rang me after the 3rd assault and said, Tash, you've got to stop. You've got to get off the road. Like, the next one's going to be a big hit. And I said, don't be ridiculous. Nothing's going to happen. And 10 weeks later it was. And it was the slap that I needed. And it was what stopped me. And my burnout was the depression, the suicidal. That's what put me into the hospital. I just did not want to be here anymore. And I was the most judgmental person when it came to that thought process at work, because I was like, how could you leave people? How could you not think about your children and your family and all the loved ones? But when you're in that deep state of depression, you don't think of anyone else. You just want the pain to stop. You want and I now have a whole new appreciation for mental health, which is why I want to help as many people and educate them. And Bill, what you were just saying before, if you don't mind me sharing this, about the chaos and the drama and everything we used to see at work, that was familiar to me. What was familiar to me was chaos, unpredictable, abuse, trauma, ups and downs emotions, not sure what you're walking into, eggshells, like that was normal. That was my familiar. Even though it's wrong and it's terrible, that was my familiar. So I felt comfortable in that. And people used to say, Tash, how do you do this? You're such a kind, soft person. You're an empath. That's why it worked, because it filled all those things that I didn't get as a child. Significance, love, variety and change, security. I knew what I was walking into every day. So the day it stopped was when I crashed and burned, because I didn't have my familiar.
That's interesting because I feel the same way. I was the emergency oldest child in my family. There were a lot of emergencies, and I tended to be the one to have to take care of them. I'm a child of divorce, and it was not necessarily the easiest family to grow up in. And I migrated from being the oldest son that was parentified too early to an emergency physician that dealt pretty much with the same thing at a different level. So I really resonate with what you just said.
Yeah, it makes sense when you understand the psychology.
Yeah, and Tash, so I want to talk a little bit about your financial life during this transition. So after the accident, You said that you did not have a pension like law enforcement does. So how does a pension work in Australia?
So in Australia, after a certain age, and if you don't have enough assets or you haven't got a home or things like that, you are entitled to have a pension. Within the emergency services, the New South Wales Police and Fire Brigade are both looked after by the government. The New South Wales Ambulance isn't because it's privately owned. We don't get a pension. So what happens, so most police and fire brigade that or get medically discharged, they have, I think it's like 75% of their wage paid to them. We get nothing. And what happened with me was you get a work cover, which is like, it's ridiculously low for what you're used to being paid. And that's supposed to cover mortgages and daily expenses, all your utilities, car, food, everything. And you get to the stage where if you did have any savings, it would dwindle. Then what would happen is you'd either go back to work too soon and you weren't ready, and it's just a snowball. So for me, I was fortunate enough to, again, a good lesson, I didn't take any sick leave. I didn't take annual leave very often. I had so much up my sleeve to use. So although I didn't get the sick leave back because we don't get that reimbursed once you're off, but I had a lot of long service and annual leave. That's probably what saved me till my court case was over. And that's the only thing that saved me from losing my home.
So was any of this money through your employer? So wasn't a pension?
No, this was just work cover. This was just through the company that insures the ambulance service. They pay you a small amount of money.
Were you saving on your own at this time? I mean, we have a direct contribution plan called a 401k, which is the umbrella under which hopefully as many people as possible in the United States save for their retirement. But honestly, 40% of people would be in poverty without Social Security in our country. So that is the true safety net. You said you didn't budget. Were you saving for this future self through these 30 years? Had you been planning for your future self? Had you been doing anything to organize your own money or manage your money?
My ex-husband was, and he did it well until we broke up, which was a few years before the accident, and I didn't do it as well as him. So that was my big lesson.
Well, I had a big lesson at the time of my divorce as well.
Yeah.
So I feel you there. So I guess it sounds like to me, this benefit that you were getting, when you were off, it sounds like it was similar to our version, Bill, of like disability insurance. And they were paying you not as much as you were making, but a portion since you were out of work and you couldn't work for medical reasons.
Yeah. So it was a very small amount. It was a basic, what you started as when you were a level 1 paramedic. And that was like $400 a week. So gotcha. $800 a fortnight does not cover people's mortgages, food, bills, daily living, children. So when you're used to getting somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a fortnight, dropping it down to $800 is a big difference.
Wow. And so what did you do to bridge the gap?
I had to put in claim all my annual leave, claim everything that was sitting there in case, because I didn't know at that stage whether I was going to be leaving or not. I had to use that because I would have lost my home. And the court case took, even though this man was charged and he was at fault and all of those things, I still had to wait 5 years for a very horrendous court case to finish.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask you how long that took because I know it takes a long time. So it sounds like you did have some money built into an employer plan that you were able to pull out of to bridge the gap.
It's just what we call our annual leave and our long service leave.
So you had not saved anything for retirement.
You were just getting the financial equivalent of this leave that you had sitting there. Okay.
Yeah, I was still living. I went after the divorce because I wasn't very good at the budgeting. I went back to a program I knew, and that was living from week to week, which was terrible.
You mentioned earlier a superannuation, that we don't understand that term in the United States. Can you explain what superannuation is in Australia?
Yeah, so superannuation is where a percentage of your money is taken out of each wage and put into another superannuation department. And that gets put away each week or each pay till I think it's over 60 now here. or 65 in Australia, and you can't touch it until that age. So it's a little nest egg for when you're, and if you're smart with superannuation, it's a good little nest egg when you're finished. But it's not all, I don't know if it is now, but it wasn't compulsory when I started working back in the 80s, but I always had super. So I do have super, and part of my payout with the accident, I put a big lump sum into the super so that as I get older, it's there for me.
Is that managed by the government then?
There's different ones. There's government and there's private.
So even though you weren't working for an employer at the time, you were able to put money into your...
No. Once you're not working, that stopped unless I had another amount of money coming in to put into the soup. So as soon as the ambulance service cut me off, my super stops. Yep.
So it was through the ambulance company?
It's who they chose, yeah. But you can opt to go out of that and do a private one.
Okay.
It depends what you want. You do get choices. But once I was out of the ambulance, you had to then find your own money to put in, whereas you could actually put your own in and they would contribute, I think it was 3%.
So they would give you a match, because that's very similar in the US. Most of the time there is an employer match. You put in a certain amount and then they'll match you. But once you are no longer an employee of theirs, we have something that's not coupled with an employer that you could always do even when you're employed. So you started doing it saving on your own at that point. So this was obviously after the settlement. Once you got that.
I had a little bit left from the annual leave and that, because there was a lot of long service and annual leave. So I then was smart enough to put that aside. So what I needed to do was I paid parts of the mortgage or not off, but enough to keep me going. And then I would have that buffer there, because I never wanted to be in that situation again where I was at risk of losing the only thing I had left that felt normal to me, which was my home.
That begs the question, actually, about financial education. Jackie is a financial educator. We now have 26 states that require financial education in our high schools. What is the status of financial education in the schools in Australia?
There is none.
None. Oh,
No.
My goodness.
And this is stuff people need to know.
We should be thankful for what we've got.
They do economics and they do things like that. But when it comes down to everyday basic, it's the same as me saying children need to learn what I teach at a young age, because this is where people become stuck in the wrong type of relationships, friendships, workplaces. They, are forced to do something they don't want to do because they don't know that they have a right to say, actually, I'd like to do something different. These are the things that people need to be taught at school, like finances, what I am passionate about, general life stuff that gets them through. I understand all the other stuff, but these are things that help children. And you're now saying that how many schools do you need to speak in? 37. Did you just say you speak in 37 different schools?
It's
different schools.
26. And breaking news, Bill, there is now a 27th state as of March 2025. Kentucky is the newest state that now requires personal finance in order to graduate from high school. So high schoolers are getting this, and we keep adding on states, so it's going in the right direction. But yeah, it's always interesting to hear how other countries are doing it. So they don't require that in high schools in Australia.
So this accident was a wake up personally, professionally, and financially, because without the settlement, if you hadn't had the accident, you could have been financially devastated in your retirement, correct?
100%. 100%. And I'd still be working in a job that was breaking me down.
This happens a lot in our late starter population. It's sort of the golden handcuffs, where you get stuck in a job you don't want to do and you're burned out because you haven't planned. And the wake up is always a trauma. There's always some trauma, whether it be divorce, an accident like in your case. And then the light, in the darkest day, the light shines, right? And that sounds like what happened to you. And you're at a very different place. How many years after this happened?
It was 2017, so it'll be 8 years in May.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
And, it's interesting that you should say that, Bill, because the thing I'm trying to teach people is don't wait for a trauma. Don't wait for a life-changing event. You have the ability to change all of this now. And Amy was a speaker on my program. And the women in my group got so much from the financial advice because we don't get that here.
Wow.
She was amazing. She got, clients out of it because people loved what she had to share. And that's what this is all about, helping people at these stages in life. And I've got women in the program that's just finished that have changed careers in the age of, mid-50s, selling homes because they're finally doing things that they want to do, moving out to different areas, buying mobile homes so that they can, go and look around, travel and investigate and see the world, because they finally have a new mindset. They finally see that they're not stuck in this box that is called society. So it's not too old to change anything.
Well, life is a bit about habits. And the habits, as you say, epigenetics, are formed early in our life. And whether it be financial, personal, relational, as you mentioned too, with regards to attracting the wrong people, attracting the wrong habits with money. And I agree with you. You can change. Hopefully the wake-up call isn't as painful as to what you went through, but generally there is an instigation. I didn't have anything traumatic other than the fact that I turned 50 and realized nobody's going to save me. I've got to save myself. I finally met my future self and said, I'm not ready for you. I got to show up. I got to catch up. And that's why we call this program Catching Up to Fi. Do you feel like you were behind and that you caught up?
Absolutely. I was behind in nearly every aspect of my life. That's what I mean when you said, why is this the best thing? It's changed every aspect of my life. There's not one thing that is the old. And it's all been worth it. It's all been, it's been a domino effect. It's affected all the people in my life. And don't get me wrong, growth isn't easy. Growth is very hard, but it's so rewarding. So rewarding.
I need to ask a question about forgiveness, because I think forgiveness is a very empowering personal trait. Did you forgive the person that crashed into you? And did you forgive yourself for not being ready for the next phase of your life?
I forgave myself a lot of times, but the day I knew, Bill, that I was well was the day I could sit there and thank this man. I actually sat there and thanked him, not to his face. I thanked him because he gave me my life back. He actually gave me my life back.
Well, and Tasch, I think it's beautiful the way that you are now manifesting all of your trauma and pain in a way that you're wanting to help others. Because when you go through something like that, you can either repeat it. When you go through trauma, you can either repeat it or you can do just the opposite. And you're doing just the opposite, and you're trying to help many other women to do the same thing. So I think that's extraordinary that, like Bill said, that was quite, a wild ride you had to go through to get to that point. But you're here and you're helping so many other people. So you've got a lot of years to do a lot of good. And I'm sure so many women are benefiting from it.
Do you know, I work with men as well. It's not just women.
You work with, okay. I don't know why I assumed women. Well, you know what? I'm thinking of Amy's.
Don't forget about us. Don't forget about us.
I'm thinking of Amy's where Amy has women. Okay. So yeah, you do anyway. And I guess tell us a little bit more about your life coaching and the work that you do now.
So now my life coaching consists of, I still do one-on-one, but I tend to be doing more program work, and that's facilitating. It's usually one night a week. And the last program I did was a 12-week program. The next one I'll do will probably be 8 weeks because I've recognized I can fit some modalities, some pillars in together. I would love to be doing more podcasts. And like I said, I'm going to start my own podcast. And I think, Jackie, I've done this my whole life. I've always been the person people come and talk to. And that's probably what got me to do this, because people will say, why don't you do something with it? Like, you do it anyway. You might as well go get paid for it. You might go and when I started to really, research and do the work and do the training, and I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on retraining myself, has been worth every cent. And this is the thing people don't understand. The money that you put into yourself pays off.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you what training and what type of education and stuff what do you have to do to prepare yourself to be a life coach for others? Because that sounds like such a big, heavy thing to do. How do you get the knowledge and the training that you need in order to do that type of work?
So Firstly, lived in life experience, actually going through the healing process, doing the modalities, doing the hard work, embodying what you teach. That's the first thing. The second thing is I went to a training, like an institute for coaching. I went there for a couple of years. I had a really good mentor and coach myself, and he took me through so many different processes, and the rest is I sign up to anything that's going to help me. I sign up to anything that's going to give me a certificate to help with healing, help with childhood trauma, inner child work. Even the stuff with Amy, I really started to look into that, like how I can help people down the finance trap. I know I can direct them to Amy, but I wanted to have a bit of an understanding. It's basically just whatever your passion is, get as much information as you can. I listen to podcasts all day. I listen to, YouTube videos of different speakers or different modalities or different like tapping and things like that. I will research anything that's going to help me to help my clients. But mostly it's the programs. And look, the coaching, you've got to warp some of that fire to understand what some people go through, because there is no point in sitting there saying to someone, yeah, I understand that, but you have no idea. But you actually have not, like to sit there and say, oh, I can understand. And like Bill just said before, he didn't grow up like you and I. He can't understand no money, no food, no love, no, all these things. We can. You can empathize with someone, but we actually feel it.
Well, it's kind of like being the alcoholic that helps other alcoholics, right? They've gone to the bottom of their pit, they've climbed back out of it, and they recognize how much work is required in getting there. And so they are sometimes some of the best ones that can help their fellow man or woman, dig out of that pit that they've dug for themselves as well. Oh, that's what you're doing. That's what Jackie's doing. Heck, she didn't necessarily have a trauma. She retired, and then that lit her fire literally as she fired and retired. And now she's changing the world with financial education. And I'm honored to be sitting here in this podcast with both of you. These are the kinds of people we get to talk to in this show. How lucky am I? How much of a difference does it make in my life to have dug out of my pit and found the inner DJ in me?
Bill used to be a DJ, if you didn't know.
The answer to your problems is almost always staring you in the face.
Always.
Yeah.
Yep, always. And I think what people don't realize, and that is the one thing we teach in coaching, everyone has a different filter, a different lens, a different map of the world. So what happened to you and what happened to you may be similar, but it's not the same. And we have to not project what we think and feel and our bias onto someone else. We have to allow them to speak and let them get out what they need. And then what we do with coaching is we direct them to go forward. One thing I do not like, and I lived this with my own trauma, was talk therapy does not work. You talk and talk and talk, it keeps you stuck in the situation. And what we do with coaching, or my type of coaching, is I help you break down what the issue is, then we work out a way to move forward. We get to the root cause of the problem. We don't just sit there and keep talking about the event, because the event just keeps you stuck in that emotional, psychological, physiological space, and that is unhealthy. So my coaching, I've been known to, people say I am tough but with love. And I do it because I know if you sit there, you get stuck, you become a victim. And then you don't get the results and the benefits. So I don't ask anyone to do anything I haven't done myself.
You absolutely have. And I love that you're a lifelong learner. And, formal education is great, but, I can, speaking for myself as well, so much of what you learn is from you experiencing it. And you've got a ton of that. And then it's also how in our minds do we take a moment to even process that? Because until we do, it's hard for us to say, okay, now I can kind of figure out how this happened in order to help other people. And then you go digging. And Bill, I see this a lot in you too. Bill doesn't have a CFP, but some days when we're talking to our guests, I feel like you do. So Bill, you've learned a ton on your own based on your experience. I have done the same thing. Even though I might have my CFP and I went back and I tell everyone, I retired myself before I did any of that. And I knew 80% of what I needed to know by just doing it on my own. And it was the other stuff that kind of got me over the hill. But I love that, you have so much experience and you have thought deeply about that in a way that you're able to share with your clients and others. And that is just so valuable. Like, you cannot underestimate the value that brings when you're doing the type of work that you're doing.
Well, Tash, I believe you when you say talk therapy doesn't work, because I was lecture daddy and my kids didn't learn anything about finance from dad.
Yeah, he was lecture daddy.
And I'd rather be known as listening daddy, because listening is a skill that's hard learned and hard to do. And it helps you get to the root cause of things where people help solve their own problems. Here I am sounding like a therapist, but well, we all have a story. And we just met a gentleman named Azul, who will hopefully be on the show at EconoMe, who is a teacher of 8th graders. And every 8th grader that was in his class left the class an author, a published author, because they had a story to tell. You have a story to tell. I have a story to tell. I think you have a book in the making, do you not? Because your story is so inspirational. Tell us about your book.
Well, you'll laugh at this, and it will not surprise you after what I just lost on the bio. I had written, I think it was 90,000 words or something, and I couldn't find it. And I was devastated because it was a new laptop. I found it the other night because I was looking for something to send to you. That's how I found it. So now I can get back into it. And it is basically going to be a book on my story, my bio.
Beautiful.
Well, that's incredible. Guess what? Meeting us in the States, getting prepared for this podcast, a lost 90,000 word book was found, hidden treasure, and now your journey continues. Isn't that interesting?
That's the one thing you just mentioned before, the stories. And the thing that people get stuck on, there's this thing called gatekeepers, which is our stories, our beliefs, our values, and our identity. Our stories form our beliefs. So what happens when you believe something, you will look for as much evidence to support your belief system, even if it's not serving you, right? And that's where people get stuck in the money situation. Their belief is that money's too hard to come by. Money doesn't grow on trees. I haven't got enough for this. I can't do that. That's not going to happen. That belief system was given to them. And it might not have been by the parents. It might have been by someone at school, a coach, a teacher, or whatever, as in sporting coach. The beliefs then form their values, and then their value then gives them their identity. And this is a major thing that we do in the coaching world, is break those stories to help them retell a story, make a new story, which forms new beliefs, which forms new values and gives you a whole new identity. So that was the other answer to my coaching.
Well, I think that is actually a great place to close this show. Those are great thoughts to end on. Tash, I want to thank you for joining us all the way from down under. It is a pleasure to meet you. I really hope to meet you in person when I make my trek, what is it called? My walkabout down to Australia.
Well, I'm actually on the Sunshine Coast, which is 2 hours up from the Gold Coast. You are welcome here anytime if you do come this way.
So I have a quick question about your location. How close are you to Bali? Isn't that pretty close to Bali?
So we're a 6-hour flight to Bali.
Okay. I knew that it was 6 hours? Oh, wow. That's a lot farther than I thought.
Well, she may not know what you're talking about, Jackie. Maybe you should tell her.
Well, I'm going. I will be speaking in Bali. There is something called Phi Freedom Retreat, and it will be in Bali, Indonesia in September. And I just remember Amy saying that Australia is close because I think her partner, her fiance, is Australian. Now, obviously, Australia is a big country. So where you live, it sounds like it's further away from Bali than other parts.
No, it's about a 6-hour flight. So up the coast, you've got New South Wales and Queensland. I've actually just moved from New South Wales up here to Queensland. So it's a 6.5 hour maximum flight from any of these airports. And my son actually was living in Bali, so I used to go over them a lot.
Oh, look at that.
Well, maybe we can encourage you to go visit them in Bali.
Yeah.
Oh, he's back here now. He's down on the Gold Coast. But it's funny that you should say you're going to Bali for a tour. because I've just been invited to Miami, Florida for the International Women's Conference.
Oh, I think you'll enjoy that. So I tell you what, this world it's much smaller than what I saw it when I was a kid. And pretty much anywhere you want to go, you can get on a flight and be there within a day, even clear across the world. So, and we have so much in common, probably more in common than we have different. There's cultural and, environmental things and experiences within different countries. But wow, people's feelings, who they are, finances, trauma, all these life experiences, it doesn't matter where you're from. So that's why we were so excited to talk about you today, because you've got a slightly different lens, but your story sounds very familiar. A lot of it resonates with me. A lot of it resonates with Bill as a physician, and a lot of our late starters. We hear those things all the time. So we appreciate you being so open and so transparent and sharing your story with us. And we're looking forward to the book. Now, what was the name of the book again?
I haven't got one yet.
Okay, we haven't gotten one yet, but we know it's going to be about your story. And any idea when it might be released? Any target dates?
Now that I found it, I can get back into it. And look, my goal I'd love to have it out by next year.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Today, we have time traveled with technology today. I feel like I've been next to you in Australia. I feel like we've been having a cup of coffee or a glass of wine together. Our show is not just about the technical nature of catching up to Phi. It's about the stories of people that have caught up, have found their true selves, have found the freedom to explore their next chapter. You've done that. Jackie's done that. I've been doing it a little bit. I've got a ways to go. I'm an unfinished product. But Tasch, thank you for joining us today. Jackie, this has been awesome. We will see you next week on Catching Up to Phi.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brizard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptophi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Phi. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to Phi. Cheers.